Over on Jaguar Gatorade, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about a bizarre 1999 game between Washington State and Idaho, where the game took place at Washington State, but for some reason, Idaho was the home team. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. Also, join me tomorrow night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play NFL Trivia for a chance to win cash prizes. Link to play below. And now, on with our feature presentation. I know what you're probably thinking when you clicked on this video. How could you possibly make a video about the San Diego Chargers making a horrible trade during the NFL Draft and have it not be about what they did at the 1998 NFL Draft when they traded away a future first-round pick, a second-round pick, and three-time Pro Bowler Eric Metcalf just so that they could move up one spot with the Arizona Cardinals and take Ryan Leaf? And don't get me wrong, that trade was atrocious, and it very clearly did not work out for the Chargers. However, at least at the time, the move made complete sense. Anytime you can draft a guy who you think is going to be a franchise quarterback, you do it. That is too important of a position, and you do whatever it takes to get him. Plus, Leaf was a highly regarded prospect that a ton of teams coveted, and the fact that he flamed out as badly as he did was shocking to a ton of people. For the most part, the Ryan Leaf trade looks stupid only in hindsight. This, on the other hand, is a trade that looks stupid in foresight, and looks stupid from the start. Imagine moving up 9 spots in the second round of the NFL Draft for the extremely low price of a future first-round pick. Seems ridiculous, right? Giving up a future first for a current second is usually a really bad idea. But when you break down this trade in particular, oh boy, it looks insane. And unsurprisingly, this move did not work out in the slightest bit. In 1996, when the San Diego Chargers drafted Virginia Tech wide receiver Bryan Still, the move left a lot of people scratching their heads, and more than a quarter century later, still has people wondering what the heck general manager Bobby Beathard was thinking. This is the story behind the stupidest draft trade in the history of the Chargers franchise. Before I talk about the trade in question and why it made absolutely no sense whatsoever, we need some context to understand just who the player was, and why the Chargers coveted him so badly. In 1995, under head coach Frank Beamer, the Virginia Tech Hokies were one of the best teams in college football. Even though Virginia Tech had sponsored football since 1892, notwithstanding 2 seasons in the 1940s due to World War II, they had never had a season quite like this one. They finished the season ranked number 10 in the AP poll and number 9 in the coaches poll, both of which were program highs. They won the Big East for the first time ever, and won their conference for the first time since 1963, when they were in the Southern Conference. They ended the season with 10 wins, which was the most they ever had in a season. They won the Sugar Bowl, which was their 3rd bowl win in program history and was by far their most prolific. And while there were many reasons for that, including an absolutely suffocating defense that allowed just 13.8 points per game, which was the best total amongst every team in Division 1A, perhaps no man was more important than the man you've been watching this whole time. In 1995, wide receiver Bryan Still was a force to be reckoned with. Now, he was exceptional in 1994, where he led the Big East with 21.7 yards per catch and finished second in the entire NCAA in this category, only behind Jimmy Oliver of TCU. He was also dominant on special teams that year, leading the Big East with 25.9 yards per kickoff return. However, in 1995, he took his game to another level, finishing with 32 receptions for 628 yards. Both of these totals led the Hokies, as he was perhaps the go-to target of quarterback Jim Druckenmiller. But if you remember Bryan Still in his collegiate career for one thing, and one thing only, it has to be that Sugar Bowl victory against Texas, where in a 28-10 victory, he went off, as Texas had no answers for stopping him. His performance was so good that it made people forget that one day before the game, it was revealed that Texas had a 30-year-old fraudulent player on its roster. Bryan Still finished the game with 6 receptions for 119 yards and a touchdown, and he had another catch in the second half that got the Hokies down to the 1-yard line. On top of that, he had a 60-yard punt return for a touchdown at the end of the first half that completely changed the complexion of the game and gave the Hokies the momentum, as from that point on, Virginia Tech scored 28 unanswered points. For his efforts, Still was named the MVP of the game, and perhaps more importantly for him in terms of his future prospects in the NFL, his draft stock skyrocketed. There are some players that leapfrog off of the heels of a great bowl game. Think of your guys like Solomon Thomas at the Sun Bowl, for example. And during the 1995 bowl season, Bryan Still was that player. His performance was that good. And don't just take my word for it, take Mel Kiper's word.
The Sugar Bowl, that 28-10 win by Virginia Tech over Texas, catapulted a guy like Still into this position because he had a great game. He had that punt return for a touchdown. It got him on the board. Then he did a great job catching the football. That one game, I think, made Bryan Still in a position where he could be a pick.
Told you, the game was that good. And when the 1996 NFL Draft rolled around, there was one team in particular that, considering the circumstances and the lengths that they went in order to get him, maybe liked him a bit too much. The 1995 season was a bit of a disappointment for the San Diego Chargers. 1 year after shocking a lot of people by making it to the Super Bowl, which was their first and to date only appearance in the big game in franchise history, they only went 9-7 the year after, and actually finished the season with a negative point differential. The Chargers then had an extremely quick exit from the playoffs, losing to the Indianapolis Colts 35-20 in the wildcard game, which oddly enough, came on the same day that the Sugar Bowl took place. If you want to learn more about that wildcard game, in particular, an incredible performance by Colts running back Zach Crockett that came completely out of nowhere, click the card in the upper right corner. It's safe to say that after such a good and surprising 1994 campaign, that 1995 was a bit of a letdown for the defending AFC champion. And one of the reasons why was a lethargic passing attack. The Chargers were not good when it came to throwing the football, finishing in the bottom half of the league in just about every major statistical category, including interceptions thrown, passing yards, yards per attempt, and passing touchdowns. Their receivers were not the best, as the only proven guy heading into the 1996 season was Tony Martin, who, while great in 1995 with 90 receptions for 1,224 yards, was on the wrong side of 30, and was likely going to be declining relatively soon. Their number 2 option from the year was Shawn Jefferson. He was now in New England with the Patriots. And their number 3 option from the year was Mark Say. He was now in Philadelphia with the Eagles. And this means that when you look at their roster at the receiver position, it was completely barren. I mean, just look at this. Outside of Tony Martin, the receivers on the Chargers heading into the 1996 NFL Draft had just 5 receptions combined in 1995, with half of their depth chart not even having a single catch. An already atrocious passing offense got significantly worse. It was very clear that the Chargers were going to need to spend some high draft capital on the receiver position, and maybe even multiple picks, because this unit was just not going to cut it no matter how you want to take a look at it. Now, the Chargers did not have a first-round pick, for reasons that we will get to in just a bit. But they did have the 50th pick in the draft, so they had a mid-second rounder to work with. But the Chargers decided that having the 50th pick wasn't good enough. They needed to upgrade the receiver position, and they couldn't afford to take any chances. With that, when the Buccaneers were on the clock at pick number 41, they called up the Bucs and struck a deal. And the deal that they struck was, well, it was absolutely terrible. A good piece of life advice for everyone: your goal in a relationship should be to find a woman who loves you as much as Bobby Beathard loved trading away first-round picks. Beathard was known for this. He was the general manager in Washington from 1978 to 88, and at that time, made just 3 picks in the first round. Granted, those were 3 very good picks, as I think any team would be thrilled with a haul of Art Monk, Mark May, and Darrell Green. But you get the idea. Beathard traded away first-round picks like 8-year-olds trade Pokemon cards on the school playground at recess. And he did the same thing in San Diego. The Chargers had no first-round pick in 1994, 1995, or 1996. And after what Beathard pulled with the Buccaneers, they were about to have no first-round pick in 1997. Because for some reason, the Chargers decided to trade their first-round pick in 1997 to the Buccaneers for their second-round pick in 1996. Straight up, no other picks attached. And tons of people were scratching their heads at this one. Because holy cow, why did the Chargers think this was a good idea? Number 1, and perhaps the reason that I'm criticizing this trade more than the other ones of a similar nature that Beathard made, they had pick number 50 in the draft. If you wanted to get Bryan Still that badly, and were scared that he wasn't going to fall to you, then why didn't you just trade away that pick? Do what a normal team would do in that situation, and give up a second and a fourth to move up 9 spots. And if you're thinking to yourself, but maybe he wanted to keep both picks in 1996, so that his roster would have a better chance of winning that year, more on that later. A move like this raises the question, did the Chargers need to trade up for Still? Honestly, probably not. There was nothing indicating that Still wasn't going to be available. I would understand it if there was a run on receivers that left the Chargers panicking and thinking that they would be left out in the dust, but that simply was not the case. From picks number 35 through 40, A grand total of 0 receivers went off the board. There were still 4 receivers that eventually got picked in the second round, with those guys being the aforementioned Bryan Still, along with Muhsin Muhammad, Bobby Ingram, and Derek Mays. So it's not as though the Chargers were fighting for scraps for one player. This is like when you're in a fantasy draft and the guy takes a defense in the 6th round because he's scared that he's going to miss out on a run on defenses. Even though no one has taken a defense yet, and even though he's on the clock again 5 picks from now. So if hypothetically that run happened, he would be able to recover pretty nicely. I get the idea of trading away a 1st round pick for a veteran, like what Washington used to do back in the 70s and the 80s. A veteran is a proven commodity, and the 1st round pick can be anything. So get the proven guy as a starter and trust your scouts to fill up the depth. But I never understand the idea of trading away a future 1st round pick for a 2nd rounder. That could be the number 1 pick you just dealt away for a guy in the 40s. That could be the next great running back you missed out on, so you could take an underwhelming blocking tight end, like the Atlanta Falcons did in 1999 in a disastrous trade, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But obviously, Beathard has a method to his madness. He wouldn't be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame if he didn't. So let's see what he had to say afterwards on the move. As he said on the trade, it's hard to make sense out of keeping the number 1 if there's a player that you feel strongly about. If you can get the pick, why wait a year and do without the player? We'd rather get the players than worry about the 1st pick next year. We'd rather have the opportunity to select a player and work with him for a year. Alright, so I don't necessarily agree with that, but I get the logic. Except for the fact that 9 picks later, because they were so adamant about keeping that 50 pick that they traded away a 1st rounder, they took linebacker Patrick Sapp, who was never going to be starting with the team anyways. The linebackers were maybe the best part of San Diego's team, and with the legendary Junior Seau and recently acquired linebacker Kirk Avea from the Philadelphia Eagles, who Beathard knew well since he used to play in Washington, Sapp was going to be a backup. So the Chargers not only gave up their number 1 pick, but did it so they could take a guy that was not going to help the team out in 1996 and was not going to be cracking the starting lineup barring something incredibly unforeseen. Of all the times that Beathard pulled this stunt off, on paper, this definitely seemed like the stupidest and most baffling one of them all. But did it work out? Absolutely not. Because as it turns out, having a 1st round pick is better than having a 2nd round pick. When the Chargers made that trade, they were hoping that Bryan Still could revive a dormant passing attack that hurt them throughout the 1995 season, and could have more performances like that Sugar Bowl against Texas. That did not happen. In fact, the exact opposite happened, because considering the circumstances and what the Chargers gave up to acquire him, Bryan Still might be one of the biggest busts in the history of the franchise, and I do not say that lightly. He got overshadowed throughout history by, another player that the Chargers drafted shortly after that flamed out in a blaze of glory, but he was still really bad. In 1996, Still had 6 receptions for 142 yards. In 1997, he had 24 receptions for 324 yards. 2 years into his NFL career, and the man had yet to score a touchdown. I should also note that the next receiver off the board after Still was Muhsin Muhammad, who only went on to play 14 seasons in the NFL and finished with 860 receptions for 11,438 yards and 62 touchdowns, and had more receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns on 3 separate occasions in 1999, 2000, and 2004 than Bryan Still had in his entire NFL career combined. The only time that Still really looked like his Sugar Bowl self was on opening day against the Buffalo Bills in 1998, when he had 6 receptions for 128 yards and the first touchdown of his NFL career. Only took him until the first game of his 3rd season to do it. I'm imagining a ton of people who thought after that game, and after that shocking victory, that maybe, just maybe, Ryan Leaf to Bryan Still was going to be the quarterback to receiver connection that was going to take the league by storm. Obviously, that never happened. After 3.5 seasons, he was released in the middle of 1999 and played 3 games with the defending NFC champion Atlanta Falcons before never playing in the NFL ever again. By the time his 4-year career ended, he had 83 receptions for 1,181 yards and 2 touchdowns, catching less than 50% of the passes thrown his way. That is abysmal. And if you want one more stat to rub salt into the wounds, the Chargers traded a future 1st round pick for a wide receiver who wound up catching as many touchdown passes in his NFL career as Jonathan Ogden. That's right, Hall of Fame offensive tackle Jonathan Ogden caught the same number of touchdowns as Bryan Still. That is not good. The moral of the story here is that trading away a first-round pick so you can have a second-round pick seems incredibly stupid. Why you're giving up the chance at a blue-chip player for a guy in the 40s doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, especially for a wide receiver. But if you're going to pull off something crazy like this, you better make sure that it works. Otherwise, we'll be talking about it years down the road, and you will look like an idiot. And man, for all of his genius moves, Bobby Beathard sure looked like an idiot here. It's been over 25 years since that trade that went horribly wrong. But you have to wonder for the Hall of Fame general manager taking Bryan Still, if he still regrets it. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.